What's up, YouTube? It's Coach Cory, and we got some huge news from Supercell. They just held a developer Q&A on Reddit, and we got some great answers for them, some news about global release, auto-aim, and a bunch of other great questions, 16 in total. So let's go over them and break them down. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so let's try and go over the most important questions first, and let's start out with one about auto-aim. So here was one of the auto-aim questions. I know many people have been mad about auto-aim, and I know you were doing something to nerf it. Is there anything in specific about it, what you have in mind right now that you can tell us? Thanks. So they responded, right now we're working on adjusting auto-aim so it's more difficult to spam, and I think that's the key word here. They're making it more difficult to spam. They want auto-aim to be a viable option across all skill levels. There should be a cognitive choice during a game where players have to skillfully decide which is the better option between aiming manually or tapping quickly. And then this is Ryan's aside. Personally, I think Spike is a good example of this right now. Sometimes it makes sense to use auto-aim, but other times if your target is further away, you'll need to lead them a bit with manual aiming. This type of decision-making is what we're trying to achieve. So my reaction, first off, honestly, I'm pretty disappointed. I think it's great they're trying to make it more difficult to spam, but I don't want it to be viable at high skill levels. I think it's great to be viable at low skill levels. I don't want it to be something where it's an either or. I want it to be a situation where at the very high levels, it's always better to aim manually, except maybe in rare situations where the enemy is perhaps one hit and they're very close to you and you need that quick reaction just to finish them off. I think you're never going to be able to get rid of that at the least. I do think it's a little disappointing they're trying to still keep it viable at very high levels. Maybe I should not hold my judgment. We should wait and see what the nerf is before we really judge it. But I'm already a little bit worried on the direction it sounds like they're going with the auto-aim nerf. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about a status update or how the retention really is. I know a lot of people think the game is dead right now. Although contrary, earlier they said that actually the retention rate was improved. So let's talk about that. So here's a question. In the status report following the landscape changes, you talked a lot about retention as the key reason you chose to make these changes. In the status report, you said, in quotes, "Did it work? It's too early to draw concrete conclusions from the data. However, it appears to be looking positive." End quote. It's been a few weeks since then. Could you talk a little bit more in detail about how the data is really looking? So they responded, overall, we're looking at the retention of new players who downloaded Brawl Stars after the update. We compare this data to previous player retention levels for players who downloaded before the update. Okay, that makes sense. We saw no negative impacts from the changes to landscape and slight positive trends. Well, that's good to know. Of course, we'd love to see bigger positive trends, but there's nothing in the data suggesting that changing to landscape was the wrong decision. I repeat, there's nothing in the data suggesting that changing to landscape was the wrong decision. On this note, I know there's been lots of feedback on Reddit about lower activity levels and fear that, quotes, "the game is dead." However, I want to emphasize that you're the elite top players. Most of you have been playing for almost a year. Fair enough. Our focus has been on the early game for quite a while, which means that we've sacrificed providing content for late game players. This is definitely true. Obviously, the last update had none. This focus will shift once we're happy with the early retention. Right now, we're in soft launch. We need to build the foundation. And actually, guys, before responding to this, I want to go into a question that honestly puts this in really good perspective. And I think this will make a lot more sense to you guys after this next one. So going right into it, my question is, does the dev team also prioritize the retention of current soft launch players as opposed to brand new players? And if so, what plans are in place for this? This is a great question. I'm really glad they asked this. So Ryan responded, absolutely, we're interested in the retention of all players. However, our focus is on the retention numbers that allow us to be confident in a global launch decision. That means we're primarily looking at the first 30 days of retention. To your point about older players, 90 plus days, leaving the game, this doesn't factor heavily in development decisions right now. I think this is a really important question, so I'd like to go a bit further in depth here. And this is a great example. Let's imagine we're building a bridge across water to get to our awesome beach on an island. We'd like to get lots of people across so they can enjoy the island. We make this test bridge and bring 50 people out to test it. We see that not many are using the bridge to get across. That's not great, and we need to get that number higher before we invite the world to see it. Meanwhile, the few people who did cross the bridge are getting a little bored at the beach. That's not great, but our focus has to be on the bridge. We want millions of people to get to the beach, so we need to devote all our resources to making the bridge perfect. To those already crossed the bridge, they think the bridge and the beach are fine. They don't know why we're still messing with it and changing the railings and adjusting the steps, screwing with sandcastles, trying out boats instead of bridges. They love everything as it was when they crossed. We know, and we're so glad for those people who have already crossed. Unfortunately, there are only a few of them, and we need to improve and change the bridge. Otherwise, we might not ever open it to the world. Personally, I thought that was a great metaphor for the game right now. There's a really small amount of people who are playing the game, and those who crossed enjoyed it a lot at first, and now they're a little bit bored. But what they're doing is they're trying to focus on making it so as many people as possible join and play the game early on. And then what they plan to do, from what it sounds like, is once they got it so a lot of people are joining, they're going to make it, try and keep them to stay. So right now they're focusing on providing the content and features that make it easy and accessible for a lot of people to join and play the game. And then they're going to try and focus on keeping those players. So right now, they're not on the keeping those players stage. Obviously, you can sometimes do both of those at the same time, but they're trying to focus on the new players right now and then focus on keeping them for a long time. So I think that makes sense in a game that's in beta and soft launch. I'm sure once it's global, they'll have no choice but to just focus on keeping them playing as opposed to getting them in the game. It would be a little bit late after global, except for maybe the first few months. So I think that makes sense. Okay, so on that note, let's go over some things that they talked about they might be adding either in the next update or one of the coming updates. So first off, here's a question. What kind of features are you thinking of adding to Brawl Stars in the future to keep things fresh and new for all types of players? This is the response, this is a big question. It's difficult to predict what we'll add months or years down the road, but we know for sure that new game modes, new brawlers, and new maps will definitely keep things fresh and interesting. Looking at the nearer future, we'll have a new take on the trophy progression system, yay, and are reworking the key rewards a little bit more. More details to come, and actually, well, first off, I think it's, yes, new brawlers, new modes, new maps. That's definitely something that's going to keep those players who are already playing the game to keep playing. Just like Fortnite, they keep adding new features, different things. If you keep adding new brawlers, new game modes, all those players who are playing right now, they'll keep having new, fresh things to do. That would definitely keep people playing. I agree with that. Let's go into a question that adds a little bit more detail to this. Okay, here's this question. Will players have a method of unlocking brawlers with gold / some other resource similar to chips in the past? And the response was, we won't be adding something exactly like chips, but we're currently working on some changes to the trophy progression system, which will have guaranteed rewards at certain trophy levels. This should help ease the feeling of randomness while giving clear goals and milestones. So that's definitely pretty cool. Something more rewards for trophy levels definitely is neat. I feel like really currently, I mean, you get some gold for every like couple hundred trophies that you reach, but it's really like, or keys, not gold, but it's honestly, it's so small. You get like 2 to 3 boxes. It's really not that exciting. But I think one key thing they said there is we won't be adding something exactly like chips. So not something exactly like chips, but something somewhat similar to chips. So maybe there's going to be some sort of way to get a brawler, and is this going to be possibly from reaching a certain trophy level? Is that a possible reward? Perhaps you reach a certain trophy level, you unlock a certain tier of a brawler. That would be a really cool reward. Maybe if you have the brawler, you get something else that's supposed to be equivalent. I don't know how they would do that, but Hey, that would be a really cool reward for pushing up in trophy. Okay, here's another feature they said. Well, it's hinting at that they're going to add. So here's the question. Are there any plans to implement a continue with group function? And their response was a smiley face. Now, this to me is a clear, possibly a clear indication that they're probably adding this. Whether that's, I don't know if that means what update that's going to be in, whether that's this next one or the one after, but it sounds like they're going to add a continue with group function or something really similar. So, hey, that's definitely great. Something that makes random matchmaking better, I am all for. Because right now, it's, yeah. Okay, and then, hey, they answered one of my questions. Let's go. I asked a question, and this was the first one they answered on the Q&A, so I'm pretty hype about that. My question was, okay, let's go for something different. Thoughts on adding a second interchangeable star power for Brawlers? Here's their answer. This is a cool idea. We've talked about it many times as a team. At least right now, this isn't on our roadmap. Sad face. This is partially a philosophical question about whether customization would be good for the game. Would things like readability suffer? However, it could be a really neat late game addition to add some variety to maxed out Brawlers. Alright, so sounds like they're not working on it right now, which is honestly pretty understandable, especially considering some of their answers to earlier questions. But they've considered it, they've talked about it. That's definitely pretty cool to see that they've thought about this too. I know the community has brought this up as well, adding a second interchangeable star power. I think that would be really cool. That would definitely add a lot of different variety and depth to the game, in my opinion. Actually, it would just add so much depth, I feel like. And I would love it. I feel like it would make the competitive scene a lot better, too. What do you guys think as well? I don't know, but it's okay. It's not coming right now. At least they're discussing it. It could come later. Okay, now let's talk about a problem in Brawl Stars right now. A big problem, and that's top-level Showdown. There's a lot of organized teaming, there's a lot of alliances, which is very hard to stop. So there was a question about this, and I think there was a great answer. And the question was, will we see any changes in Showdown regarding teaming, the reward system, or matchmaking? Their response was, it's especially tough for those of you at high trophy ranges. The small player pool at the top causes issues. If/when Brawl Stars goes global, a much bigger player pool should certainly help to prevent this. If not, we'll have to see what other measures to take. But they did say, in the next update, we will hide player names in 300 plus trophy games. So, to me, this is fantastic. This eliminates a lot of really big problems with teaming right now, which is where you see someone you know and you just see them because of their name, you automatically start either teaming with them or not teaming with them, as opposed to just playing it as a survival style game, whether that's teaming with someone randomly or not. So to me, I think this is great. So now it's going to be a lot harder for there to be alliances, which is a huge problem in Showdown right now. And even as well, it's going to be harder to queue up together as well, because even if you get in the same game, you're not going to necessarily know that you're actually in the same game unless you're in voice chat with someone. And even then, if there's multiple of the same brawler, you might get confused as to which one your teammate really is. So to me, this is going to be a great fix to the organized teaming, the alliances going on at top level Showdown. And I'm going to be really glad to see it hopefully ending in the next update. Okay, so what about the opinion on landscape versus portrait? A lot of people are still complaining about landscape. So there was a question about that, of course. Here was the question. Is there a chance that classic Brawl Stars will come back? If retention keeps going down, and if not, will the game finally be altered to be made into a landscape game? The game, maps, and mechanics are designed for portrait right now, question mark. Their answer was, we live by the mantra, never say never. But I think in this case, I can make an exception. Portrait is never coming back. At the end of the day, we tested both versions and Portrait did not stand up compared to Landscape, okay? Regarding maps, we're pretty satisfied with their current design, though we'd like to add more. Although you can't sneak around the sides, the space on the left plus right leaves room for the joysticks without having them obstruct the view. We're still adjusting some mechanics and we'll bring some changes to auto aim in the next update. I think that's actually a really good point that they made, that the space on the left and right does allow room for joysticks without having them obstruct the view. In Portrait, that was actually maybe not a big issue, but it was definitely an issue. Anytime you're trying to aim as a tap to shoot player, anytime you're trying to aim in the bottom left, it was almost impossible because your finger for moving or whatever was always there. So it was really hard to do that, and you could just be in the bottom left of someone's view and you would have a distinct advantage over them because it was just so hard to shoot in that part of your phone, of your device, whatever. I actually think that's a great point. I didn't really think about that. The extra space on the sides where there's just like nothing, just part of the map, is actually kind of useful. So maybe it is fine. The maps are fine as they are. I don't know. Maybe it is. There were also a bunch of questions about the controls. And I'm just going to summarize these questions, basically asking if the controls are going to be changing. There's some complaints about the controls. I've had some complaints about the controls. What they said is you won't see any major changes to the controls aside from auto-aim tweaks in the next update. So I'm not sure whether to be disappointed by this or not, because they said any major changes. So that means there might be some minor changes, which in reality might be all we need. I'm going to be disappointed if there's nothing that makes the super button easier to use for brawlers that have to jump. Currently right now, if you're trying to jump backwards with like El Primo, Piper, even Crow, you can't jump the full length of your super. That's definitely pretty annoying. So whatever, if they can make small minor adjustments that just makes that easier to use, I'd be totally fine with that. Doesn't necessarily need a major change, but I really hope that's coming in the next update. And there's also a question about throwers. Definitely kind of hard to use too. Question was, will you be working on throwers' disability to throw right underneath them, Dynamite especially? They said it's certainly a little tough for throwers, but there aren't many adjustments we can make without fundamentally changing the controls. One of the weak points of using a thrower is that their area of control is not helpful for them in close range. I mean, okay. A little disappointed maybe, but I think that sort of makes sense. I think it's fine for brawlers to have weaknesses, so maybe they're just going to be really tough in close range. I think you can get a little bit used to this maybe, but I guess it's going to be something you have to keep in mind to try and never get close to any enemy brawlers. Maybe as long as they're balanced in other ways, it should be okay. Okay, so here was another great question, and it was, have the developers tried any ideas suggested by the community? And here was their response. Almost everything we do is inspired by the community. Each and every balance update, our game designer comes to chat with me, Ryan, and we discuss what the community thinks needing nerfing or buffing. We then compare that to the data and make some decisions. I can also say they typically ask the NDA chat as well what we think, but I don't know how much they take into consideration or not. We will next remove names from Showdown at upper level trophy levels as discussed earlier, which was community suggested. We added more options for trophy requirements and bans. We added 1,000 Lakes. We've added a name change option, are taking action against own goals and brawl bars, and so many more. I could go on all day listing features that have inspired from you guys because you are amazing. Please keep the ideas coming. Tar was a community suggested idea as well. Yeah, well, I think it's great that they're listening to the community, or they're trying to. I know they haven't really been responding that much to the community on like Reddit or social media. It would be great to see that more, and I would love for them to do that a lot more. This is a great step, doing a Q&A. Hopefully they keep responding to the community in other ways though. Okay, there was a question about the monetization system as well. Is the dev team considering changing the monetization system for the game? The current system feels very dull when opening a box, as all the power points have the same rarity when you get them, which really doesn't feel exciting opening them compared to unless you get a new brawler. And honestly, I really agree with that. And they said probably not, at least not at the moment. We've changed the system quite a few times, so true, and we're pretty happy with where it is right now. I have some pluses and minuses about the current system. It's definitely like less annoying to open boxes, but it's also really boring, honestly. So hopefully they can add a couple more things that you can get in boxes, and I think that could be a great way to make them more exciting. But I guess that's not in the plans right now. Hopefully they do it later on, maybe after they've done the new feature stuff, and actually probably it's really not that important, so maybe after the late game stuff too even. Alright guys, I'm going to leave a link in the description and the comments to the Reddit Q&A if you want to see it as well. But that's going to be it for today's video. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of their answers? Are you pleased with the direction they're going? Do you think they're messing it up? What do you think? Guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will catch you later.